Welcome back. It is Chris Niccolls here from Bow River Troutfitters, and today I want to have a little bit of a discussion about the misconception that you cannot catch lake trout on the fly rod. Now, just to give you some context, Elliot and I just came back from an incredible trip at Aylmer Lake Lodge, one of our favorite places to fish. And every time we go to these trips, people say, well, did you catch this fish on a fly rod? With lots of question marks. And so really what I want to talk about is the tackle that we used, the conditions that we're fishing in, and how you can absolutely catch monster lake trout on nothing but fly rods and have an amazing time. So where does this misconception come from that fishing for lake trout on the fly rod is either impossible or so difficult that it's not worth doing? I think part of it is the water that you're fishing. There are some places where you probably would have to get tackle down very deep to try to catch the large fish. But where we fish at Aylmer Lake Lodge, that is just not the case. I mean, it's such a unique fishery above the tree line in the beautiful barrenlands, Northwest Territories. And although there are fish very deep in those waters, you have access to some of the largest fish at much more reachable depths. That only makes it a really exciting fishery, but a lot more fun to fish with a fly rod as well, because you have many different ways that you can tackle this water. I want to talk to you guys today really about the tackle that we would use going to Aylmer Lake Lodge, what works, what kind of stuff you need to take with you if you want to have an adventure like this, and really just so you can realize how versatile fly fishing is for catching these fish up here. Okay, so let's talk about dry fly tackle. And honestly, it's going to be very similar to what you're fishing already on your home rivers, except I would go with slightly heavier tippet. 3X would probably be my bare minimum, whatever you can get through the eye of the hook, basically, because these are going to be strong fighting fish. Now, we did bring a 4-weight, and that can be a lot of fun. I mean, if you're fishing for grayling or lake trout on glassy waters with small dries, that can be really exciting. But overall, I would say a 5 or 6-weight rod is absolutely essential to bring. We were throwing larger flies and the fish were very eager. So anything that'll throw hoppers nicely, hoppers and droppers if you wanted to, any sort of gurglers and poppers to strip across the water. And you do want a rod with a little bit of backbone in case you do get into a very big grayling or even bigger lake trout. Now, we're still talking dry fly tackle, but I've got an 8-weight rod here in my hands, and absolutely I would bring one of these as well. Now, it's very versatile because, yes, you can throw streamers with this and fight larger fish. It's nice to have a fighting butt if you really do hook into some kind of monster up there. But also for dry fly patterns in windy conditions, think large stuff like big gurglers or mouse patterns. You will be surprised how often you will be in very deep water and you will see big fish rising for things on the surface. And in that kind of situation, you want a stout rod, you want a big mouse pattern, and it can be a wild experience. All right, so let's talk about subsurface tackle now. For rods, we like to bring 9 and 10-weight rods. Bring a couple. It is possible that you might snap something in the excitement or break on a large fish, so do make sure you have a backup. But I think the more important thing is a lot of people assume if you're going to fish for these big lake trout, you need to throw these big monstrous like musky flies, and that's just really not the case. We actually had the best success throwing more moderate-sized flies like this with hooks more in the 1/0 to 2/0 range. In all honesty, we actually prefer smaller hooks because we find that, especially with a lot of the spoon tackle, with the big hooks on there, it's hard to get really good solid hook sets into those tough mouths of those lake trout. We found that our smaller hooks actually seated really nice. We got good solid hookups. You're not going to bend out a 1/0 or 2/0 hook. The other thing that we really found with our streamers that we really appreciated with fishing out there is to have that second trailer hook or to have a hook further down the fly. Often lake trout will just smack your fly or do small bites on the tail, and it's nice to have that. I even fought my biggest fish out there. The first hook actually came out, and I was lucky enough to grab it immediately on the second hook. That was nerve-wracking, but if I didn't have that trailer, I would have lost that fish. So last couple things I want to say about flies, don't be afraid to go to even smaller streamers that are easy to cast. We had an angler that was up there a couple weeks before us. She was roping in large lake trout using very compact, very lightweight streamers. They had stout hooks. That's all that mattered, and the fish loved them. She had a great day. Color-wise, we found, again, pretty much anything works, but bright colors like orange and green, chartreuse, those were really effective. Silver and blue were really good, and actually on our epic day that we had, pink and white seemed to be the key. So make sure you have a few colors you can switch between, but honestly, we don't find the fish to be that picky. Far more important than the flies you're going to fish is actually going to be the fly lines you're going to use for those streamer patterns. Now, classically, we've often used full sinking lines. You can cast them. They're not the nicest to cast, but you can certainly troll with them, and we're letting out almost the entire fly line. And you got 90 to 100 feet of fly line in the water. You'd be surprised actually how shallow that still goes. We actually had really good success this time using heavier sinking heads, especially something like the depth finder lines. Elliot and I were fishing the 400 and 450 grain lines on our 9 and 10 weight rods. That seemed to match up really nicely. You could cast them out there, but also they troll very deep. These have 30 to 40 foot sinking heads, 400, 450 grains. It really localizes that weight out at the end so that the fly gets down nice and deep to a strike zone, but actually presents in a more parallel fashion to the surface of the water, not so much an angled fashion straight down. And we were actually getting down to about 17, 18 feet. That got us right into the water where the big fish were just kind of strolling around the shoals. In fact, a lot of the other guests at the lodge were trolling spoons and plugs. They were still working 8 to 10 feet of water with incredible success. And really, honestly, we were able to get down into these shoals, working these transitions, often in 10 to 12 feet. Sometimes we go a little bit deeper. If you've got a good guide on the boat like we do, you can then go around in circles where the slack enters the line and you get a little bit more depth. Something we loved about the Depth Finder series itself is not only is the head sinking fast, but the running line is an intermediate sink, and that again really helped to get things right down in the strike zone. But you can work a variety of depths. It all works at Aylmer Lake Lodge, and this sort of concept that you have to get down 40 or 50 feet just does not apply to those waters. You can absolutely have a great day with very standard fly gear. All right, I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot about the techniques, the tackle, the accessories you need to catch lake trout up there at Aylmer Lake Lodge, and also just to kind of bust the myth that you cannot catch lake trout with fly gear. We felt like we had actually every advantage catching those fish with fly gear, and we had an amazing time out there. So if you have questions or comments, leave those below. We'd love to answer anything about the specific tackle or rods that we used, what flies that we used, any sort of techniques to help you catch those fish as well. We'd love to tell you the experiences and stories that we had up there. Come see us in the shop if you're in Calgary. Otherwise, like and subscribe to the channel. We would really appreciate that. We'll see you again for another episode. It's Chris here from Bow River Troutfitters saying goodbye.